Hi everyone, this video is all about function-based behavioral interventions. I'll start the video by defining function-based behavioral interventions. I'll differentiate function-based behavioral interventions from traditional responses to problem behaviors within school settings. And then I'll give you 3 reasons to embrace function-based behavioral interventions with your work with students who exhibit challenging behavior. So let's start by defining function-based behavioral interventions. With this type of intervention, we are responding based on what that student is seeking to access or avoid. So in other words, we identify root causes of problem behaviors. Why is a student using profanity in the classroom? Are they seeking to access attention, avoid altogether escape tasks and activities? And we respond trying to provide the same type of reinforcement, but through socially acceptable behaviors or the absence of the problem behavior. That's essentially what function-based behavioral interventions are, is identify the root source of reinforcement and respond accordingly. Okay, that differs from traditional responses to problem behaviors. I talked in my previous video about one-size-fits-all disciplinary policies. So we have a behavior like profanity. We don't consider why that behavior is happening. We just focus on what the behavior looks like or sounds like, and we respond accordingly. So with one-size-fits-all disciplinary policies, maybe profanity, the response is an office referral, attention, a 1-day suspension. Okay, with function-based behavioral interventions, why is that behavior happening? How can we consider the root cause of that behavior and address that root cause through our intervention? So 3 reasons to embrace function-based behavioral interventions in our work with students. Number 1 is they can be implemented proactively, not just reactively. So in other words, let's get back to that behavior of profanity. Why is that behavior happening? Okay, maybe the student is using profanity to access attention. In those cases, we can embed opportunities to respond during lectures, cooperative learning opportunities, think, pair, share, increase our task-specific praise to corrective feedback ratio, reach out to families and share successes in class to give that student the attention they're looking for, okay? Maybe the behavior is happening for avoidance escape. Maybe that math work is too difficult. We can remind students of reinforcement contingencies to incentivize desired behaviors at the beginning of class. So in other words, as that math teacher, I know that Jason struggles with independent seat work. Hey, Jason, by the way, there's a mystery problem in the seat work today. If you get it right, you can cross 2 problems off your homework tonight. If you get stuck, remember what you can do for help. You can use a calculator, you can ask me for support, or you could ask a peer for support. So that's function-based behavioral interventions being implemented proactively, not reactively, preventing problem behaviors from occurring. Okay, another great benefit of function-based behavioral interventions is we can use them to teach new behaviors. So in other words, just like we provide students with practice opportunities to acquire and master academic skills, we can do the same thing with behavioral skills. Maybe we have a student who maybe has limited expressive language skills and they're leaving the classroom without permission, but maybe it's a good reason. Maybe they need to use the restroom, get a drink of water, and they just don't have the skills within their repertoire to ask permission. Okay, maybe we can reinforce as classroom teachers using a break card, signaling the need for a break, using text or some other AAC device to take that activity break. All right, going back to the student I talked about earlier with profanity, maybe they have the same options. They can verbally request the need for a break. They can use a break card. They can signal to us. We can prompt them earlier in the day. Hey, by the way, if you get stuck, remember what you have available to you. You can request a break to just get away for a minute. We use that as adults sometimes, right? We just need to step away for a minute. We can give that same opportunity to our students and encourage our students to request a break, advocate the need for a break, and then reinforce that break through teaching strategies. All right, and the final benefit of function-based behavioral interventions I want to talk about is it allows us as classroom teachers to take back instructional control in our classrooms. All right, and behavior, there's a saying, behavior goes where reinforcement flows. Embracing function-based behavioral interventions, it allows us to do a couple things. First of all, we can pinpoint sources of reinforcement for our students. All right. And second of all, we can adapt our reinforcement contingencies to make it to where there's no need to engage in problem behaviors because reinforcement's available through desired behaviors. So again, like I talked about earlier with profanity, there's no need to use profanity to take a activity break or to get out of class altogether because we're facilitating your success proactively. All right. You are able to take a brief activity break whenever you need one. All right, we are giving our student alternative strategies for accessing that reinforcement without engaging in problem behavior. So we take back instructional control there. It's essentially win-win scenarios. Students get the reinforcement they're looking for, whether it's attention, support, brief activity breaks, but we as teachers take back instructional control. So we get what we want, which is less classroom disruptions and more student success.